He built a security system to protect his family, but never imagined it would catch his own wife faking bruises, staging lies, and turning their kids against him. What she didn't know, the cameras never stopped rolling. Evan Holt, founder of Holt Tech Defense and pioneer in home automation systems, sat in his dimly lit home office, eyes locked onto the security feed playing on his screen. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of his Riverpine residence, casting long golden streaks across the walls. But Evan's attention was on the high-definition footage, not the lighting in the room. On the monitor, Marissa moved through the living room with a level of precision that struck him more like a rehearsal than daily routine. She adjusted throw pillows, rearranged items on the coffee table, and paused in front of the mirror. Her expression was practiced, not the warm demeanor of the woman who had just sent their kids off to school, but something colder, calculated. Evan's gaze narrowed when he saw her reach behind the entertainment unit and retrieve a compact makeup kit. With deft, methodical motions, she applied artificial bruises along her arms. The system Evan had engineered, the same technology he'd spent years perfecting to protect families, was now documenting a performance he never anticipated. There was no mistake. This wasn't a misguided attempt at costume makeup. Marissa was building a narrative, creating physical evidence, to accompany the emotional one she'd been subtly planting in the household for weeks. Her reflection in the mirror revealed not distress or sadness, but focus, the unsettling concentration of someone preparing for a role. His phone buzzed. A message from Noah, his 15-year-old son. "Dad, check camera 4. Last night, around 2:15 a.m. Evan didn't hesitate. Switching to the feed, he braced himself. The footage showed Marissa in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. "Everything's coming together," she whispered into the receiver, her tone affectionate and conspiratorial. "Evan has no idea. He's too obsessed with his work. Honestly, it's pathetic." She leaned against the counter, her voice dropping to a near purr. "Yeah, we'll meet tomorrow. Same place. Once I file the claims, it's over. He won't see it coming." Evan leaned back slowly, chest tight. Not only was she planning to destroy him, she was doing it with someone else. He spent the rest of the night combing through past footage. Long hours of Marissa moving through their home, sometimes speaking into a burner phone, other times whispering to herself in front of a mirror, rehearsing lines with phrases like, "I'm afraid for my safety," and "the children are scared of him." All of it was part of something larger. A story she intended to tell others, one that didn't reflect their reality. The next morning, Evan went through the motions. He prepared breakfast for the kids as Marissa claimed yet another migraine and remained in bed. Noah lingered in the kitchen, waiting for his siblings to leave for school. When the house was quiet, he showed Evan screenshots from his own phone, messages between Marissa and their younger daughter, Lena, as well as clips of her talking to Asher, their youngest, in a way that didn't feel right. They reviewed one video together. Marissa sat beside Asher in his room, voice syrupy sweet. She dangled the promise of a new video game system if he'd just tell the nice people that Daddy gets really angry sometimes. The boy's face showed hesitation, confusion. "But Dad helps me with my science project," he'd murmured. Another clip showed her coaxing Lena to talk about Evan's unpredictable moods. The teen, clearly skeptical, asked questions Marissa dodged with false concern. Evan's stomach turned. It was clear Marissa wasn't just lying. She was actively shaping narratives, coaching the children, building a case. That night, Evan expanded his investigation. His home system had a cloud-based backup only he could access. Hidden folders stored all security footage, synced across multiple encrypted locations. Reviewing a secondary camera's footage, he discovered something unexpected. Marissa had been accessing confidential data using one of his old developer tablets, which she'd hidden in a storage box labeled for seasonal decorations. Inside that tablet's memory, he uncovered a string of email drafts addressed to Colin Reese, the man she had referred to on the phone. But there were other names as well, including Tessa Reese, Colin's wife. One message stood out. Doctored images and manipulated audio clips suggesting Tessa was mentally unstable. It mirrored the very tactics Marissa was using against him. Evan recognized the strategy: controlled narratives, digital forgery, exploiting legal systems meant to protect. That evening, he stared at the footage one last time. Marissa in the hallway mirror, applying bruise-like makeup again. The camera captured her whispering rehearsed phrases with conviction, as if the lie needed to become truth. Evan didn't feel anger. Not yet. What he felt was something colder: resolve. His system had seen it all. Every word, every gesture, every calculated move. The very tools he built to defend homes were now defending something far deeper: truth. And he wasn't alone. His children had begun to notice the cracks in their mother's performance. They weren't confused. They were watching, documenting. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about restoring reality and protecting those who still believed in it. In the quiet hours of a midweek morning, Evan Holt sat hunched over his laptop, the soft glow of the screen the only light in the room. He sifted through cloud-synced archives, reviewing footage from the previous months. Each clip, each frame, was a piece of a puzzle he never wanted to build. One that revealed not just a betrayal of vows, but a coordinated attempt to destroy lives. While the cameras documented Marissa's performances within the walls of their home, digital trails outside of it painted an even darker picture. Evan had embedded logging protocols into all his home devices: metadata, IP traces, and access logs, and now they pointed to an encrypted folder she had uploaded from her office computer. Inside that folder were dozens of altered files. Voice recordings of Evan's conversations taken out of context, images edited to suggest violent behavior, and staged photos of Marissa with artificial injuries. But even more disturbing were the attachments. Doctored materials aimed not just at Evan, but at another woman entirely: Tessa Reese, the wife of Marissa's secret partner, Colin. It was clear now. This wasn't just an affair. It was a joint operation. Both Marissa and Colin were building false abuse cases against their spouses, manipulating legal narratives to gain leverage in court. The emails between Marissa and Colin were carefully crafted, often embedded in draft folders, never sent directly. One stood out. Marissa had written, "Tessa's reputation won't survive this. She's too sensitive. It's easy to paint her as unstable. I've already got fake photos. You just need to confirm them when the time comes." Evan didn't hesitate. He reached for his phone and called a number he had never used but had memorized long ago: Tessa's private line, once shared with Evan when both couples socialized at company events years before the fractures began. Her voice, calm but cautious, answered. Evan didn't waste time. "We need to talk. It's about our spouses and the lies they're building." They met at a small cafe across town that afternoon. Tessa Reese looked tired but composed. Her eyes scanned the footage Evan displayed on his tablet with growing disbelief, then horror. She recognized the same gestures, the same expressions, even the same phrases Colin had used in recent weeks to gaslight her into doubt. She admitted she'd noticed changes in her children too: Clara, 14, and Julian, 12, asking strange questions about whether she ever lost control or acted scary. "He's been conditioning them," she whispered, her fingers trembling over the tablet. "I thought I was imagining it." They spent the next 2 hours cross-referencing dates, screenshots, and behaviors. The overlaps were chilling. Both Marissa and Colin had launched near-identical strategies: private rehearsals, manipulation of children, and staging photos to be used in future court filings. Evan shared footage of Marissa bribing Asher with a gaming console. Tessa, in turn, provided a voice recording Clara had captured accidentally, where Colin said, "All we need is a little push, one dramatic moment, and she'll be out of the house." These weren't impulsive betrayals. They were engineered takedowns. Back home, Evan kept his routine steady. The children noticed but didn't question it. They too had started documenting quietly, precisely. Noah backed up audio clips to external drives. Lena compiled screen recordings of text messages. Asher, in his own way, continued to leave his iPad recording by accident, capturing late-night whispers and secret phone calls. Every night, Evan sorted the data: the false bruises, the purchased props, the voice rehearsals, even the unusual financial transactions. Marissa had been withdrawing money from college savings accounts and rerouting them into undisclosed personal funds. Noah was the one who found the transfer logs. He didn't say much, but when he handed Evan the printed documents, his expression said everything. There was no sadness, only clarity. "She's not just trying to ruin you," Noah said. "She's planning to erase us." Evan didn't respond. He simply added the documents to a growing folder labeled evidence. That night, he received a message from Tessa. "Clara just asked if I'd ever pushed Dad. Said he told her it was okay to tell the truth even if it made people uncomfortable. She's scared. I think they're ready to use the kids." The next morning, Lena slipped into Evan's office before school. In her hand, she held a small, clear makeup palette. "She left this out yesterday," she said quietly. "I took photos. The labels match some of the stuff from the fake injury kit sites." Evan looked at his daughter, strong, smart, calm. He didn't need to ask how she knew. She had learned, just like Noah, just like Asher, to read the signs. They were no longer just witnesses. They were participants in the defense of truth. And the system Evan built, the one Marissa had tried to use against him, was now preserving every lie, every manipulation, every quiet moment where performance slipped and reality bled through. The house had become a quiet archive of betrayal. But it had also become a command center, not for revenge, but for restoration. The truth was no longer just being protected. It was being prepared piece by piece to be revealed at the exact right time. The atmosphere inside the Holt household had changed. Beneath the surface of normal routines and polite family interactions, something sharper pulsed, a current of silent preparation. Every member of the house knew the truth, and each had taken on a quiet role in defending it. Evan Holt spent his evenings in his office, refining timelines and cross-referencing data. The files were becoming a library, visual records, financial evidence, metadata trails, and psychological patterns that, taken together, told a story not of a troubled family, but of a coordinated assault on trust, dignity, and legacy. Across town, Tessa Reese was doing the same. Her background in art therapy helped her understand subtle behavioral cues, and she'd started documenting moments with her children. Instances where their speech patterns matched Colin's phrasing or where their behavior shifted after time with their father. Clara had stopped trusting hugs. Julian had started asking about safe homes. Tessa's instincts told her the conditioning was accelerating. Then it happened. Noah approached Evan one evening and said, "We've been talking. Me, Lena, Asher, Clara, and Julian. We don't want lawyers to say it for us. We want to confront them ourselves." Evan was taken aback, but he didn't reject the idea. Instead, he listened. Noah explained that the children were tired of being pawns. They didn't want a court case where their voices would be filtered, challenged, or doubted. They wanted clarity, face-to-face, evidence in hand. No more manipulation. Lena added that she was already assembling a visual archive. Screenshots, photos of Marissa's makeup kits, receipts for costume supplies, timestamp clips showing the rehearsals. Asher had been saving recordings of Marissa's late-night conversations, and Julian had similar files from Colin's whispered threats. Clara had pieced together a timeline of Colin's coincidental work crises that aligned with false emergency reports. It wasn't just confrontation. It was presentation. Evan and Tessa didn't immediately agree. They knew how volatile Marissa and Colin could be when challenged. But they also saw something in their children's eyes, a fierce intelligence sharpened by betrayal. These weren't scared kids looking for justice. These were young minds demanding ownership of the truth. Together, they built a plan. Evan reserved the porch as the confrontation ground. It was symbolic. Neither Marissa nor Colin would be allowed inside again until the truth was dealt with. The children chose that detail deliberately as a boundary. Over the next week, the family prepared like strategists. Evan helped Noah with data backups, encrypting files and loading copies onto multiple devices. Lena created a sequence of photos and labeled them with short descriptions. Tessa coached Clara and Julian on how to speak clearly, control their emotions, and maintain calm even under provocation. In the basement, mock rehearsals took place. Each child took turns playing themselves and their parent, practicing what to say, how to respond to gaslighting, how to hold ground without escalating the scene. When Asher asked, "What if they say we're lying?" Clara responded without hesitation. "Then we show them the timestamps, the files. We don't argue. We prove." Noah added, "They underestimated us. They think we're still confused kids. But we're not confused anymore." Sarah, now the archivist of the operation, created a folder labeled Performance versus Reality. Inside, each piece of evidence was paired with its context. A video of Marissa applying makeup next to a text where she claimed Evan had struck her. An audio clip of Colin practicing tearful apologies beside photos he had staged to look like evidence of abuse. Julian converted their files into a touchscreen slideshow so that it could be navigated during the confrontation like a courtroom exhibit. Meanwhile, Evan and Tessa quietly spread digital insurance, encrypted copies of all materials uploaded to remote servers, scheduled emails set to go out to lawyers and child protection services in case things escalated. They weren't just preparing for a meeting. They were preparing for a final performance, one where the true actors would be exposed and the real story would be told by the very people Marissa and Colin thought were too young, too emotional, or too naive to fight back. On the night before the event, Evan found Asher sitting on the porch steps, knees pulled up to his chest, a quiet determination on his face. "She told me once," he said without looking up, "that sometimes pretending everything's okay is the only way to survive. But I don't want to pretend anymore." Evan didn't reply. He sat beside his son, watching the night sky, knowing that the next morning would change everything. Inside the house, the others were finalizing preparations. USB drives were labeled, battery packs charged, tablets tested. Lena organized her photo collection one last time. Noah rehearsed the order of video clips. Clara and Julian reviewed the outline of what to say. There was no fear, only focus. They weren't just protecting their families anymore. They were defending the idea that truth, when documented, when organized, when brought forward with calm conviction, could cut through even the most elaborate performance. Tomorrow, Marissa and Colin would return expecting to resume control. Instead, they would discover what it felt like to be confronted not by victims, but by witnesses armed with evidence. And not a single word of it would be fiction. The morning arrived bright and cold, the autumn air crisp with the sharpness of finality. Evan Holt stood in his home office, eyes locked on the security feed. The driveway camera showed Marissa's silver sedan pulling in, her movements as poised and deliberate as ever. She adjusted her hair in the mirror, practicing the same polished expression she'd used countless times, a facade of maternal concern and victimhood. But something in the air had shifted. The house she once manipulated was no longer a stage built for her. It had become a courtroom, and the audience she thought she controlled was now the prosecution. Outside, Noah, Lena, and Asher waited on the porch, a silent formation of truth. Noah stood in the center, his shoulders square, a USB drive in his pocket. Lena, tablet in hand, scanned through folders filled with organized evidence. Asher, the youngest, held his iPad tightly, knuckles white, eyes steady. Marissa ascended the front steps with a bright smile. "Sweethearts, what are you doing out here? It's chilly. Come inside before." "We're fine here," Noah said, cutting her off. His voice, steady and cold, echoed with the authority of someone who had outgrown manipulation. Marissa's smile faltered slightly. "Well, I just got back from an exhausting trip. I really don't have the energy for games." "It wasn't a business trip," Lena added, swiping her screen and holding up a photo. Marissa with Colin in a hotel lobby. Time-stamped, location verified. "You've been lying to all of us. You don't know what you're talking about," Marissa said, her voice rising in mock concern. "You're being used. Your father." "Stop," Asher interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. "We're not props. We know what you've done." She stepped back slightly, eyes flickering to the door. "This is absurd. I'm still your mother. You deserve the truth," Noah said, pulling the USB drive from his pocket and handing it to Evan, who had stepped onto the porch. She needs to see everything. Now. Evan nodded once and moved to the living room, connecting the drive to the central media system. On the screen, Marissa's private rehearsals began to play. Makeup kits, fake bruises, whispered lines practiced in mirrors. Then came the clips of her coaching Asher, coaxing Lena, manipulating Noah with false promises. Marissa stood frozen as her children watched in silence. "What's happening?" she hissed. "This is illegal. I didn't give you permission to." "You gave yourself away," Lena said. "Every time you lied, the cameras caught it." Then came the footage from the Reese household, Clara and Julian appearing on screen beside their mother, recounting Colin's psychological games, the false documents, the staged aggression. The camera captured Julian showing photos, pointing out digital inconsistencies and mirrored images. Clara explained how her father's version of events never matched their timelines. It was then that Colin's car pulled up. He stepped out, immediately sensing that something was wrong. "What is this?" he demanded, approaching the porch. "Tessa, what are you doing here?" Tessa stood beside her children, voice level. "We're showing you what accountability looks like." He laughed, a short, incredulous bark. "You've all gone mad. This is emotional manipulation." "No," Noah replied. "That's what you two have been doing for months." Footage continued to roll. Marissa and Colin's texts, audio clips of planning, photos of staged injuries, bank transfers, gift purchases used as bribes, video clips of them rehearsing courtroom statements and pressuring children to conform to their narrative. And then Marissa snapped. Her hand shot out, striking Noah across the face in full view of the porch camera. The sound echoed. Asher stepped forward instinctively, protective. Evan moved swiftly to stand between them all. No one said anything. The final line had been crossed. Police officers, parked down the block and monitoring the feed remotely, arrived within moments. The footage had already been submitted. The confrontation was merely a controlled detonation, a final performance, captured perfectly. Marissa screamed about betrayal. Colin made calls to non-existent lawyers. Neither of them noticed the officers gathering up their luggage as evidence. Tessa held Clara and Julian close. Evan rested a hand on Noah's shoulder. "We're done here," Lena said, turning off the tablet. As the police vehicles disappeared down the street with Marissa and Colin inside, silence settled over the porch. But it wasn't empty. It was relief. The truth, held back for so long, had finally been released, and it hadn't needed shouting or violence. Only documentation, resolve, and courage. Inside the house, the security cameras hummed softly, still recording. But now they weren't capturing lies. They were preserving something far more powerful. Justice. A year had passed since that cold autumn morning when Marissa and Colin were led away in handcuffs, and the Holt-Reese families began the slow, deliberate work of rebuilding something that had once been shattered. The house in Riverpine no longer echoed with suspicion or whispered rehearsals. It breathed instead with quiet conversations, gentle laughter, and the hum of systems designed not to expose deception, but to preserve peace. Evan Holt had transformed Holtec Defense into more than a company. It became a movement. Their newest line of systems, quietly labeled TruthGuard, had been designed with domestic defense in mind, not from outside threats, but from the more insidious ones that grew inside homes: manipulation, coercion, emotional distortion. With Noah's help, he integrated machine learning that could detect behavioral patterns and flag potential signs of gaslighting or rehearsed abuse. Tessa's art therapy clinic expanded to include children affected by parental manipulation. Her waiting room displayed paintings from her daughter Clara, abstract depictions of distortion, pain, and eventual clarity. Lena's documentary, Behind the Smile, had won awards at multiple student film festivals, praised for its sensitive portrayal of how technology can preserve truth in domestic spaces. Julian and Asher collaborated on a digital comic titled The Quiet Defenders, a stylized account of a family who fought lies with data, courage, and unity. The story mirrored their own journey, and readers around the country found strength in its message. Even Jason, once the quiet observer of his mother's betrayal, found healing in code. He began building educational modules for other children, teaching them how to recognize signs of manipulation through digital tools. As the families thrived, the same couldn't be said for Marissa or Colin. Marissa, now known legally as Marissa Baird, cycled through a series of low-level jobs. Her former corporate reputation had crumbled under the weight of court-documented evidence. Every potential employer found her history, not because Evan or his children had spoken about it, but because the system had recorded everything. Her attempts to rewrite the story through blogs, burner social accounts, and sympathetic podcasts failed quickly. Fact-checkers needed only to follow the digital trail. Colin's legal career disintegrated. Disbarred and blacklisted, he drifted from city to city, using aliases in hopes of escaping his reputation. But each time he resurfaced, the same footage reappeared. The same files. The same pattern recognition systems catching him rehearsing remorse in mirror reflections, never once showing genuine change. Noah's algorithms, refined over months, continued to flag behavioral indicators. They'd quietly protected hundreds of other families from similar manipulation attempts. What began as a defense had become a tool for prevention. The legacy of betrayal had not left scars. It had created structure. On the second anniversary of the confrontation, the families gathered at Tessa's clinic for a small celebration. There were no speeches, no press, just food, music, and quiet gratitude. Evan watched as Clara guided Asher through a painting activity. Lena recorded short interviews with children attending therapy for a follow-up to her documentary. Noah sat at a corner table, coding on his laptop, a soft smile playing at his lips. Tessa approached, 2 cups of tea in hand. "You realize," she said, "they've turned everything we feared would break them into fuel." Evan nodded. "We taught them to protect the truth, and they ran with it." Later that evening, Evan addressed his advanced systems design class at the local university. He pulled up a final slide, a photo of the front porch from that day, the children standing united, holding devices filled with truth. "This," he told the class, "is what security was always meant to be. Not just surveillance, not just intrusion alerts, but protection of what's real, of context, of family, of honesty." He closed the lecture with the same words he'd spoken to his children 2 years earlier. "They thought they were the performers, but we were always the audience. And we never stopped recording." Back at home, the security cameras still clicked softly in corners, but they captured something new. Shared meals, late-night study sessions, quiet hugs in passing. Not because anyone feared deception now, but because truth had become habit and clarity, a form of love. In her small rented apartment on the edge of another city, Marissa watched old videos on a cracked tablet. Her once perfect smile seemed distant now, faded, unconvincing. She still tried, sometimes, to recreate her version of events online. But every attempt dissolved under timestamps and testimony. Colin, alone in a rented room above a discount law firm, rarely spoke. He'd lost the ability to perform, his audience long gone, the spotlight permanently dimmed. Their downfall was no longer news. It was archived, forgotten by most. But for the Holt and Reese families, it remained a reminder that no performance could outlast a truth preserved with care, clarity, and courage. And the cameras, now recording joy instead of lies, remained their silent guardians.